We're continuing our series, The Road Less Traveled. And I've been thinking about this in the sense of roads that are difficult. You know, if you hike and you go up a steep climb, that's a difficult road. A rocky road, a twisty road. There's all kinds of road factors. But I also think the road less traveled has fewer people. Right? And so I want us to think about the road less traveled. Because if we're really honest, we tend to hang out and be around people that we like and we agree with and who aren't sharp and critical and judgmental and hostile with us. And so I've had people tell me, and this is interesting, I've had people talk to me and they're like, I work at a secular job and I don't like it because I'm kind of the odd man out. I'm a believer and I love Jesus and everybody thinks I'm a freak and a weirdo and some whack job. And in that sense, it's the road less traveled, right? You're kind of the odd man out. But sometimes I think depending on the circle that we travel in, we tend to find people who agree with us, who echo, and we don't always want to be around people who disagree with us or that are at odds because it's uncomfortable. We don't always like traveling. I've had travel friends and people that I didn't want to travel with again. I was like, hey, we're not doing that. And I've traveled a lot, like a whole bunch. And some people are great to travel with. Some people, you do it once and you're like, woo, that was great. Never again. The road less traveled. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about TripAdvisors. Have you ever watched or been on TripAdvisors? I really like TripAdvisors. It's this app on your phone that tells you about various places you can go and what's popular, what's not, and prices and what they advise and all this stuff. And so I would encourage you that there should be TripAdvisors on your road less traveled. TripAdvisors, people who can give you advice. If you ask me to give you advice on traveling to Cambodia, I would be a wellspring of knowledge for you because I've been to Cambodia innumerable times. And I think people who have gone on a trip can give you advice on how to travel and on that trip. Make sense to you? So TripAdvisors. And I had a friend one time, actually last year, I was in Kolkata, India, and I don't know how many times I've been there as well, but I don't go there very much. And usually when I go, always when I go, it's for Saving Moses. And Saving Moses, we do night care, so we look after the babies and toddlers of sex workers while they work. So when I go to Kolkata, I don't visit. I visit the places that would be unpopular, to put it mildly, brothels and red light districts and all that stuff. So last year when I went, there was a dude that was on that trip as well, and he had lived in Kolkata for 10 or 12, 15 years. So he knew Kolkata really well. And so he said, look, I can take you all and show you around cool, interesting Kolkata and not just the brothels and the red lights. I was like, ooh. So he was like our trip advisor. And one of the things he told us is you got to do a trip to learn a trip. So when you go someplace, it's always a vertical learning curve the first time. But how many of you like to go back to that place again and again after you've learned it? Make sense to you? So this is all some things I'm thinking about as we talk about the road less traveled. And when we think about the road less traveled, I'd like to suggest that the road less traveled is the Jesus walk. Walking with Jesus. Because at the end of the day, walking with Jesus is the road less traveled. It's not only twisty and windy and has some blind curves and unexpected, all of that, but I would propose to you that it is also not the popular road. It's not the popular road. So let's think about some trip advisors who could help us on this walk with Jesus. And today I want to give you 3 pieces of advice from 2 trip advisors. The trip advisors for us today are Peter. Everybody say Peter. And the other advisor, and I like this because it's going to be like a contrast, would be Judas. Everybody say Judas. You're like, what? How could Judas give me advice? Or how? And you're like, maybe Peter, but Judas? Because they're both seemingly opposites, if you will. And if you know, Jesus had 12 followers, the disciples, and Peter, we know the most about Peter because he was the most vocal and said both amazing and stupid stuff, impulsive, and we're fairly familiar with him. Judas, we know, as the dude who sold out Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, right? He's the turncoat, right? We don't like him necessarily. We like Peter, sort of. We laugh at him. He's kind of a do this, don't do that. Judas, don't do, But they both have advice for us. And I would propose that they each have 3 pieces of advice on the road less traveled, on the Jesus walk. So the first piece of advice that both of these men would give us relates to deception. So on this first piece of advice, the advice is, lesson 1, is accepting deception won't keep you close to Jesus. Accepting deception will not keep you close to Jesus. And let's look at Peter and Judas for both examples of this lesson as our advisors. So when you look at Peter in Matthew 26, verses 33 to 34, this is at the Last Supper, and Jesus is telling his disciples, all of y'all are going to abandon me, after this meal. And Peter's like, no, even though all fall away, you can read it here, even though all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. And Jesus said to him, truly, truly, I say to you, this very night, you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows. Deny me 3 times. And Peter, I would propose to you that he was self-deceived. He thought he was all of that in a bag of chips. I got this to the death. Everybody else will betray you, but not me. And in less than 12 hours, he was doing exactly what Jesus said. He was self-deceived. And because of that deception, he had a gap in the Jesus walk. Deception. When we look at Judas, Judas also had deception. It wasn't necessarily self-deception, but Judas tried to deceive externally. So if you look at John 12, verses 5 to 6, it says, this is where a woman came to Jesus, alabaster box of perfume. She breaks it. It's an expensive box of perfume, breaks it and pours it on Jesus as an offering. And Judas says, Judas, who betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, he says, why was the perfume not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? He said this not because he was concerned about the poor, but because he was a thief and he had the money box and used to pilfer what was in it. He was deceptive. Hey, let's sell the perfume and make a lot of money so we can give it to the poor. But he was lying. He was deceptive. And again, deception doesn't help you on the Jesus walk. It doesn't help you when you're internally deceived, and it doesn't help you when you're lying externally. So as a trip advisor, both Peter and Judas would tell us today, accepting deception will not keep you close to Jesus. Lesson number 2, I would say, is this. Flirting with religion has deadly results. Flirting with religion. So if Peter and Judas were here talking to us today and they're saying, look, you want to stay close to Jesus, you're going to do the Jesus walk. Number 1, don't do deception. Number 2, don't do religion. So an example of this is, or what Peter would say, you can read about it in Matthew 26, verse 69. Peter, and this is after Judas betrayed Jesus, Peter had followed Jesus to see what was going to happen. They led Jesus from Gethsemane, and they led him to the courtyard of the high priest. And while they were putting Jesus on trial with the high priest, Peter was in the courtyard warming himself with other people because it was nighttime, very cold, and there was a fire out there, and there were soldiers and servants of the high priest and all this, and he's warming himself in that courtyard because he wanted to see what would happen to Jesus. But it's in that courtyard of the high priest where he denies Jesus 3 times. And I would say that Peter would encourage us today that religion, what do you mean by religion? I mean doing all the things that look pious, all the dotting the I's, crossing the T's, and saying all the right things and doing all the right motions and activities. But behind the scenes, what's in your own soul? There was denial and betrayal in Peter's soul. But sitting in the courtyard of the high priest, that exposed. The religion exposes some of the garbage on the inside. Unless you start flirting with it and thinking it's okay. So Peter, in the courtyard of the high priest, that's where he denies Jesus. On the other side, when you look at Judas, Judas flirted with religion as well. How many of you have an idea of what Judas did with religion? Anybody kind of yell out? Karen, you're nodding your head. What do you think it was? No wrong answer. He denied Jesus. He betrayed him for 30 pieces of silver, right? So if you look in Matthew 26, 14 to 15, it says, then one of the 12, Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what are you willing to give me to betray him to you? They weighed out 30 pieces of silver and gave it to him. So he's making an agreement with religion to betray Jesus. And just because you're religious doesn't mean you're following Jesus. I think that following Jesus sometimes runs contrary to religion. In fact, if you look at Jesus and what he said to all of the religious leaders, those are the only people he got cranky with. Those are the only people he disagreed with, had sharp contrasts, and had very strong, violent, somewhat arguments. Religion doesn't ensure relationship with Jesus. In fact, I would say it's a poor substitute. So just if we're religious, let's not think that that's the crosshairs of following Jesus, the Jesus walk. And then the third lesson I would propose to you, and I think this is really interesting as well, is darkness can reveal an ugly interior. So the first lesson, deception, don't put up with that. The second lesson, religion, don't fall for that one either. But the third lesson deals with darkness. And when we think about Peter and we think about Judas, let's think about Peter in John 18, verse 10. In Gethsemane, at the end of Jesus' life, when Judas is coming to betray Jesus, it says that all of the disciples were around Jesus, and it was nighttime. Judas went and, prayed, Father, take this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And he told Peter, James, and John, keep watch, lest you fall into temptation. Pray, keep watch with me. And this is all nighttime. And Jesus knows in this garden at nighttime, Garden of Gethsemane, I'm going to get arrested, led to the high priest's court, and I'll be tried, and the next day I'll be crucified. So Jesus knows this night at Gethsemane is really kind of the pivot point for everything. So in the Garden of Gethsemane, at nighttime, they're all there, and the crowd comes, led by Judas, the one who betrays, and Judas brings the crowd of soldiers and the servants of the high priest, brings them to Jesus, and in the midst of all of this, He betrays Jesus. We'll get to him in a minute. But all of it is this huge, like, explosive, what's going to happen? All this violent stuff is going on. They got clubs, they got whips, they got chains. And they start to attack Jesus, and they seize him to carry him off and arrest him. And in the midst of all this heated activity, Peter, again, nighttime, whips out a sword and chops off the ear of the high priest's servant. How many of you know that's not a good thing? That's bad. And Jesus, I love this. Jesus picks up the ear, puts it back on, and tells Peter, dude, if you live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. Don't be doing that. But again, I'm saying this to say that nighttime and darkness revealed a violence and a destructiveness that was in Peter's heart that wasn't consistent in walking with Jesus. And sometimes when you go through a dark season in life, you go through hardships, you go through difficulties, things that kind of you bottom out. What happens in the dark? What happens when nobody's looking? When you're under intense pressure, when things aren't going the way you thought? In those dark seasons, what happens? Because darkness can expose some ugly on the inside. So Peter in the dark chops off the ear of the high priest's servant. Judas in the dark on the other side, in Matthew 26:47, it says, while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came up, accompanied by a large crowd of swords and clubs, and he came from the chief priests and the elders, and it says he told him this sign: when I kiss on the cheek, whoever I kiss on the cheek, that's who you need to arrest. That's my secret sign to you that this is Jesus. So in the dark, Judas comes up, greets Jesus, and kisses him on the cheek. Now don't get freaked out, okay? Because culturally, at this time in history, that was normal. That was customary. That'd be like shaking the hand, right? There's somebody you know, you shake their hand. So just don't get all nervous about, ooh, he's kissing him on the cheek. What is going on? This is weird. It's not weird. It's normal at this time in history, culture. Judas kisses him on the cheek, and that's his sign of betrayal. Again, ugliness on the inside. And Judas chose the nighttime to do this betrayal because it was the time when nobody else could see what he was doing. The crowds weren't around. The people who loved him in the daytime in the temple and all that. He didn't do it when everybody was watching. He did it secretively as he could at nighttime, in the dark, when there was the fewest amount of people around. And so what we do in the dark sometimes exposes some ugly on the inside. But family, the whole point of this, these are some advice from Peter, from Judas, on the Jesus walk, the road less traveled. If I don't want to be Peter and I don't want to be Judas, then let's take the lessons that they give us and take the advice so we make different choices, different decisions. So as we think about this, I want to give you some takeaways, some things on walking with Jesus, the Jesus walk, the road less traveled. Number one, keep walking with Jesus, even when you don't understand. There were times when Jesus said things that the disciples were like, do you get that? I don't know what he's talking about. That's too weird. I don't get it either. I don't know, but just keep walking. Just keep walking. Number two, keep walking with Jesus when he's popular and when he's unpopular. There was one point in time, and you can read about it in John 6, verses 66. There's one point in time when all of the crowd left Jesus because he said something they didn't agree with. The crowd left Jesus, and Jesus turns to his disciples and said, are you guys going to leave too? And Peter replies and said, Lord, where are we going to go? You alone have the words of life. So whether Jesus is popular or unpopular, don't let his popularity decide your walk. Keep walking. I think of these like, what was the Veggie Tales and Keep Walking. And it was the Jericho, what was that one? Remember that? Keep walking and you won't knock down our wall. Keep walking and it isn't going to fall. It's plain to see your brains are very small. We'll be knocking down. Some of you have kids or you remember it or you're like, ooh, that was good singing. Not really. Keep walking. If you need something more modern, you could do Dory on Keep Swimming, right? Dory with Keep Swimming, Keep Swimming, Keep Swimming. Just keep walking with Jesus. Whether the popularity or the unpopularity. If you understand or you don't understand. Keep walking with Jesus. Not if he lets you down, but when. Because I guarantee you, you're going to pray, you're going to ask Jesus to do something, and it's not going to play out the way you want. We want to tell you, as leaders that Jesus, it'll never let you down. In the end game, when we get to heaven, that's actually 100% true. But you're going to find some experiences in your journey on earth over however many decades that there's some down stuff when you're like, Jesus, I'm really disappointed in you. How come you didn't do? How come you let me? How come did? Anybody in the room have some of those questions or experiences online? Hello? But don't quit walking. Just don't quit. Keep walking. There are times I've been disappointed in Jesus and I'm like, well, I'm going to take my toys and go home and play by myself. It didn't benefit anybody, including me. When I got cranky with Jesus and pouty, it didn't hurt anybody but me. Keep walking. I don't get it. I'm disappointed. I wish you would have done something different. I wish this had a different outcome, but it's not going to change my commitment and consistency with Jesus. In Revelation it says, well done, my good and... There's a whole lot to be said for faithfulness. Just keep walking. If when Jesus disappoints you, keep walking. When you don't understand what's happening, when Jesus is popular or not popular, keep walking. Keep walking with Jesus when you fail. When you mess up. Judas failed. He messed up. He threw the 30 pieces of silver back at the feet of the religious leaders. And they're like, that's on you. You figured out. You do you, boo-boo. We're out. His blood on your hands. And Judas quit. He gave up. He recognized his failure. But he didn't return to Jesus and say, I'm really sorry, I screwed up. Instead, he chose to end his life. When you fail, not if, when you fail, it's not the time to quit Jesus, because Jesus doesn't quit you. Peter, on the other side, betrayed Jesus 3 times, denied him 3 times. And when Jesus came to him, and Peter swam to him in John 22, Jesus says to him, Peter, do you love me? I love you, Lord. Even though I betrayed you 3 times, I love you. When you fail, keep walking with Jesus. Don't quit. Don't give up, because he does not give up on you. So as we think about the road less traveled, we think about the trip advisors, Peter and Judas. Good lessons for us. But in this takeaway, this is what I'd like you to do here as we finish up. I'd like you to look at this list. Keep walking with Jesus when you don't understand. Keep walking with Jesus, popular or unpopular. Keep walking with Jesus if when he lets you down, doesn't do what you expect. Keep walking with Jesus when you fail. Among those 4, as you look at those, which one do you feel most applies to you at this time? When you've identified which one, just slip up your hand. Which one applies to you most at this time. Pick one. When you've picked it, just slip up your hand. Thank you. Totally appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, then with that hand, I want you to put your hand on your heart. I'm going to pray for you. I thank you, Jesus, that you are with us. I thank you that you never leave us, you never forsake us, regardless of what we do or we don't do. Jesus, for each person in the room, online, we're struggling in understanding you. Help us to keep walking with you, regardless of what we understand or don't. For those of us who are navigating the popularity issue, that you're popular, you're not popular, help us to keep walking with you regardless of who's on the journey with us. For those of us in the room online who are disappointed in you, who are hurt because you didn't do what we wanted or expected, how we prayed, please help us to keep walking with you, to hold tight to you more than anything else. And for those of us who have failed, we messed up, we screwed up, please help us to keep walking with you, to keep you as our constant companion, our faithful, consistent friend. Help us, Jesus, to keep walking with you no matter what. I pray for those of us who have been deceived, who have substituted religion, who have gone through a dark season in these lessons, in this advice. Please help us to keep you as our Jesus walk, walking with you no matter what, no matter where, no matter how, to keep you central and our highest, closest relationship. Thank you, Jesus, for loving us well and walking with us and helping us to walk with you in Jesus' name. Amen.